So it's the next day, and I wasn't going to do a wrap-up video when we got back. We got back late. We'd spent nearly 13 hours driving around, taking photos, taking some really amazing footage. But yeah, I wasn't going to go and do a wrap-up video last night. I was tired and hungry, and I wanted really to go to bed. So just wrapping up today, and Ed and I are going to go into the Rocacorba back cave. Just look at the map one last time, look at the route, just make sure that we're absolutely clear on what we want this to be and how we can make sure that everybody that comes on this trip has a really good time. Right, Ed, you better have the coffee on go. Boiling the kettle.
What do you want?
Flat white, of course.
Oh, I've made my laugh.
Yesterday we rode stage 1, stage 2, and headed in towards Andorra, but stopped at the top. So we're just going to have a look at the map and just talk us through it.
Day one's a really nice intro to the mountains, because where we are now in Catalonia, we're kind of classified as like the foothills of the Pyrenees in essence. So we've got some nice climbs, but we're really not like in the thick of it. So I guess day one is kind of like traversing yourself to the actual Pyrenees, because you start with us here in Banyoles, and you kind of work your way up to a town called Olot, and there's a few smaller climbs in there, and it's a bit of climbing uphill, but from Olot you take on a pass of about 11 or 12 Ks, and then descent down, and then you've got the major climb of the day up La Molina, which is where we kind of filmed
yesterday.
And then from there, I mean, that's kind of the first real pass of the trip, I'd say. But if you still look at like the gradients and stuff, it's 3s, 4s, and 5s. It's quite a nice intro to the real climbing. So I feel like day one's really like a trip to the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And if you look at where we're staying in the first night, it's a town called Puigcerdà, and it's on this like 1,200 meter plateau. And that to me is really like the gateway to the Pyrenees. That's where like the real climbing kind of starts.
Yeah. So that first time we did takes us to that point.
Exactly. So we did that big climb up La Molina.
And
you got stunning
descent.
views. Exactly.
Yes.
And then what's so great is you literally descend down to your finish, like at the hotel. So that's,
how long is that? That's 21k?
Yeah, 21k descent and a couple k's of flat back to the hotel. And that's quite nice to just like spin your legs out after a long day and to regroup at the bottom of the descent and like share a few laughs, because it's an incredible descent. It truly is.
This is the second climb that we filmed.
Yeah. So day 2 we start from a town called Puigcerdà, and we ride up on like some really gentle slopes up to a town called Font-Romeu, and that's where all like the Olympic athletes go and train like pre-Olympics. It's pretty incredible.
That's where the swimming pool was.
Exactly.
And this is the day that we climb the same route as the Tour de France.
Yeah. So stage 15 of the Tour de France climbed up from a town called Olot. We're going to be descending that same road down to the town of Olot, and then taking a left and doing the lower slopes of the Col de Los, and then continuing on to the Col de Creveta.
Put under pressure. Who won that stage?
Sepkus.
Oh.
It was actually a properly good stage from a breakaway, and then they finished into Andorra. So we will ride some more of that Tour de France stage on stage of day 3 of our trip.
Right, day 3 and 4 we're in Andorra, aren't we?
Exactly.
Yeah, which is quite cool because we stay in the same hotel.
Yeah, so
for 2 nights.
We're staying for 2 nights in Andorra in a town called La Massana. So day 3 of the trip, we're leaving from Aix-les-Thermes, which is in France, and we're riding into Andorra. So what's quite cool is we actually get to cross like into the Andorran country, which is quite fun.
Well, that's the cool thing about this trip, right? Because we're going from Spain to France to Andorra, into France, back into Spain.
Exactly. So like it is. I mean, it's quite fun to cross the borders, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, we saw it yesterday. Like it is quite cool to kind of arrive somewhere new, and it feels like a nice transition. But going from Aix-les-Thermes in France up to Andorra, it's a longish slog. Like we're going from around 1,000 meters to the high point of the tour, which is the Porta in Valeria, which is 2,400 meters above sea level. So there's some altitude to be gained on this day, and you probably will feel that in your legs.
Yeah. Actually, that'd be. I think that's quite cool, because it's like, well, if you've never been to altitude, you're going to really feel the effects, and that's quite a good memory to take home with you.
Exactly, and when you hear Simon wheezing, you know why.
That's going to be you.
True. But then from the high point at Port Valeria, like the whole of Andorra is basically on a slope. So like the valley road is basically a 30-kilometer climb at 4%. So from Pasta La Casa, which is the high point, we basically descend all the way down to La Massana and stay there for 2 nights. And then day 4, we actually get to explore Andorra a little bit. So there's a beautiful climb called the Col de Ordino, which is literally like, visually is incredible. Like the views down into Andorra are pretty phenomenal.
That's the one that you showed me that has the absolutely stunning panoramic view.
Exactly. Like truly, Andorra's beyond picturesque. Like it's hard to describe, but on a beautiful day in Andorra, it's really hard to beat it. And you feel like, I mean, the high point of the tour is Port Valeria, so it's 2,400, and that's the road. Like the peaks above you are like in essence like in excess of 3,000 meters. Wow. So they are phenomenal. Yeah. And as well, from on day 4, like riding out of La Massana, we'll do Ordino, and then we'll go to Arcalis, which is actually was the finish of the Tour de France stage in 2016. Who
won that stage?
Tom Dumoulin. Oh. So, and it's really it's visually it's phenomenal. It's a hard day of riding because you're still up at altitude. So don't be fooled by like the shorter distances on day 3 and 4. Like there are shorter stages, but there's a decent amount of climbing, and you've got altitude, and you've got some big days in your legs already. So yeah, they're not to be sneezed at just because there are a few less miles.
And you've got the big day on the last day.
Exactly.
We'll talk about the chocolate in a minute.
Actually,
we should talk about the chocolate.
Yeah, probably. So like the final day we leave Andorra, and probably the most important thing before leaving Andorra is to stock up on chocolate.
Yeah. Why?
Because Andorra, firstly, has a very low tax rate, so attractive place to live, but has no taxes on alcohol, cigarettes, chocolate, washing powder, surprisingly, electronics, etc.
And Toblerone.
Yeah, personally, big fan of a Toblerone. If you have to choose a country to bonk in, truly it has to be Andorra, like 100%. I've sat at a petrol station in Andorra, like sort of like 25k from home with a massive climb still to go, sat with a Coke and literally Toblerone's this size. Because you walk in and it's like the same price as like a Mars bar, you get an entire Toblerone, you're like, this is a bit of me.
If you have to choose a country to bonk in, it has to be Andorra.
Plain and simple.
So, right, let's talk about the last day, which is an epic day in itself.
Exactly. So the last day is... We were playing around with this for a while because it is a big day. It's 175 kilometers, so it's over 100 odd miles. But it's quite cool because you're riding home. So in Andorra, you're at altitude already, so your run home is relatively fast. So what you'll see is a lot of pros go to Andorra to altitude train, and they all drive there, and then they all ride back. So they're usually with a partner or something, but the ride there is incredibly hard.
Really? Is that what they do?
Yeah, because it's like you can average like 34, 35 k's an hour because you've got quite a lot of like altitude meters to lose.
Yeah.
So it's really fun.
We're coming from how high to?
So we are coming up from like just over 1,200 meters in Andorra La Vella, and we descend down to Banyoles here, we're at 300 meters. So there's climbs in between, so there's still ascent meters in the day, but we lose a decent amount more than we gain. Yeah. So what's quite fun is you can tick off Ks faster than you normally would.
Now we drove down some of that yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah. So there's still climbs. Like we've got to go back over the La Molina Pass, which will take a slightly different route. You've still got sort of 20k descents and still some 10-kilometer climbs in there.
But it's going to be fast.
Exactly. So what's really nice is to tick off a big distance, but also you're kind of just pushing to get home.
Yeah. And here's the cool thing. So people will look at that and go, that's a long way to ride on the last day. But because the main part and the reason why we chose it is because we're going to be going fast from those to fair.
Exactly.
We'll just cover so much ground so quick.
Especially leaving like Andorra, like there's a lot of Ks of like 1-2% downhill. So with like a nice group, you can really tick along nicely. And even coming back into Spain, like there's some bigger descents, and you know, the last sort of 30 kilometers from Olot to us is pretty much all downhill as well. So it's quite fun to actually tick off a big day at decent speed. So that's kind of why we didn't want to break it up, because it's a challenge, but it's something different.
It's a challenge, but it's going to be a big smile challenge at the end, right?
Exactly. And you got loads of chocolate in the back anyway, so there's no problem.
Nice one. Cheers. Right, that's us done talking about the trip. I hope you've enjoyed the videos. Ed and Carl have just been amazing here at Rocacorba. I'm really excited for this trip. Like, it's just going to be amazing. We've got a year for anybody that's interested in coming to get fit and ready for it. So if you like what we're talking about and you're interested, or if you're just new to the channel, just hit subscribe, tap the bell to stay in touch, and I'll be back next week. Oh, and don't tell Ed, I've just nicked his Toblerone.